We have a new idea for the show. In the next coming weeks, we're going to talk about how to improve your iPhone photography. It's Monday, June 19th, and this is the iPhoneography podcast. I'm Greg McMillan. I'm joined by my good buddy Dave Podner. Hello, Dave.
Hey Greg, how's it going tonight?
It's going really good. We got some beautiful weather. Can't
Ah,
complain. And we've got some really exciting things to talk about.
yes we do.
Um, we're not talking about new products or services or nothing like that, but we're talking about kind of what this show is all about, and that's learning new stuff. So, quick little backstory for everybody. I was sitting at my desk and I was trying to think of something that I could write about for this column I do. It's called Beyond the Sensor, and I put it on the Facebook group and in a couple other groups, and sometimes it even goes right on my website, or maybe it was there first, and I, you know, turn it into a column on the Facebook groups. But anyway, I was thinking, what could I possibly write about? So I had this brainstorm to do something that kind of goes against my grain, but Dave's actually talked me into thinking that it's maybe not so bad. And that is using Chat GTP, that AI generator, to come up with some ideas. So I typed in something like, I forget what the exact words now were, but I said, what can I write about to help people improve their iPhone photography? And it came up with a good long list of things. So I thought, hey, this is pretty interesting. So I took each item in that thing and I asked it to basically summarize that, like each one. And basically it come up with almost like a course, I guess you could say. And so Dave and I are going to spend the next X number of weeks. I forget how many weeks it's going to be. Let's see here. It looks like it's going to be 7 weeks talking about this stuff that Chat GTP gave me to, you know, uh, these ideas to talk about to help people improve their photography with an iPhone. I mean, and a lot of this stuff can be used in traditional photography as well, not just mobile, but we're going to put our own spin on things with our knowledge and experience that we've had over the years, because Dave and I have been shooting with just iPhones for quite some time, hence the podcast. And we're going to start with the first one that it gave us, and it was mastering composition. So the thing said, it started with the line, mastering composition in iPhone photography involves understanding and applying fundamental principles to create visually compelling and balanced images. Here are some tips to help you improve your composition skills. So before we get started, Dave,
mhm.
what do you think of this whole idea? Do you think it's
I
a
think
banger? Or
yeah, I do because a lot, and I hate when people this is the basics. And this is not just the basics of iPhone photography, like you said. This is just the basics of photography or any kind of visual art.
yeah.
If
Hmm.
you were a painter, you would still think about these same ideas. If
Oh,
you
sure.
were
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
sculpting, you would still have the same ideas.
Yeah.
Any
Hmm.
kind of visual art, um, anytime you have an image somewhat related, even if it's a uh, AI generated or computer generated image, this is still kind of rules. And again, these are rules of thumb. These are not hard and fast rules.
Right.
Sometimes you can break the rules and get something interesting.
Yes, exactly.
But as a and because I hate to say basics because it makes it sometimes feel like beginner, but it isn't. It's just a good foundation to build off of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before you can break the rules, you kind of have to know what things are based on. And if you master that, then oh, if I do different, or if I don't do this, or if I do this instead, or if I follow this, this is what it's going to look, but I can do one or two things to add my particular touch to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing is, if you get used to a composition, again, you don't need an iPhone for this, anything that you're taking a picture of.
Yeah.
You start to look for this without consciously looking for it. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
some of the things we're talking about, you just kind of go, oh, that would be an interesting picture, or I like the way that looks. And after a while, you're like, the whole idea is so ingrained. You're like, I like it. I can't put the 5 points down why this works. But when you start looking back, you're like, oh, I like it because of this.
Hmm.
Like, as we like 4 or 5 points, you go, oh, I like it because of this, 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 and that's why it's interesting to me. But a lot of times you don't think of it as you're taking the photo,
Yeah.
you know.
And a lot of things that we're going to talk about will actually be applicable to video when you think about it,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? And as we go through these, people, if you think about that, folks, you'll probably realize that, yeah, this could apply to video. So the way we're going to do this is we are going to suspend our um, section of the podcast called Our Recent Photos. Because what we're going to be doing is, as we talk about each point, we're going to have an image on the screen of your podcast player, just like we do with our recent photos. So, for this episode, we have 9 different things we're going to be talking about. So there's going to be 9 different photos on the screen to look at. And then when we finish the whole series, then we'll bring that segment back to the show.
Hmm.
But so,
Yeah.
as we talk about these things, or as with the beginning of each segment, take a look at your phone, and you'll see the image that pertains to the part of the composition that we're talking about. And so, we each have images in here that we're going to talk about, and I've got 4, and Dave's got 5. So, um,
Now,
on
Greg,
our
before you get started, I want
yeah,
to say real quick, 2 of my 3 images would have been 2 of my recent photos.
you know what? Mine would have been all of mine would have been recent too. in fact, in
And
fact,
two, one of the one is definitely not recent because it's showing frost, and it's been a while.
oh yeah,
And the
yeah,
other 2 are from the Pittsburgh Marathon, which was early May. So we're talking still month and a half ago.
yeah.
So we're all,
Two of
all the images are relatively recent. Plus, now that we have an outline for the next few weeks,
mhm.
we can kind of get a feeling and look for pictures that are examples of what we're going to show.
Yeah, it's basically like a self assignment.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah,
And this
that's
is something that people at home can try. You want to
oh
try
yeah,
doing rule for thirds, or some of the other ones is like, okay, go and take a picture and post it in the Facebook group, or post it
exactly.
wherever you want to look, and say, oh, I'm trying. Don't think about it as assignment, because we're not you know we're
No,
not
we'll just
formal,
say,
but give it a
it's
try.
kind of like a little bit of homework where you can just go
Yep.
out and you know kind of think about what we talk about, and take some pictures and then put them in the group, and then maybe maybe we'll come up with some hashtags that people can use that will group them all together, and we can find them and have a look at them, and see how people make out. So, but yeah, it's I think it's going to be a fun
Hmm.
series to do, and I'll guarantee you, Dave and I will probably learn from each other by doing this,
Yeah.
because that's what it's all about. Teach what you know and learn what you don't. That's I always say that. So, so we're going to start with rule of thirds. That's probably the most popular, um, uh, you know, uh, composition thing that people talk about. And so we'll start when we do these, Dave. We'll start by reading what it said
Hmm.
in Chat GPT, and then we'll expand on it. So, rule of thirds: enable the grid overlay on your iPhone camera settings. The rule of thirds suggests placing key elements along the grid lines or at their intersections. This helps create a sense of balance and visual interest in your photos. So, folks, if you're looking at your screen, you'll see this. This is a lookout tower right here in my hometown, and the base of the tower is at a lower elevation than the boardwalk that goes up to the door, where you can actually go in and climb the tower to the top and look out over the city. And when I took this photo, as you could see, the boardwalk comes out maybe just a little lower than the third, but it's pretty close to the third. Third, like out of the two horizontal thirds, it's on the top one, and then the vertical structure of the tower itself would be on the right side vertical line of that third. Like if you had a grid on there that showed, where the thirds are, so the boardwalk comes out and where it connects to the tower, that would be where the two lines intersect on your grid lines, and that just makes for a pleasing image. It balances it out. It doesn't look awkward. It doesn't look heavier on one side than it does on the other. And I think that's why that rule is so widely used by a lot of people, and so important in composition, because it just gives that aesthetically pleasing look to an image. And and like Dave said earlier, that rule is made to be broken. But just to illustrate the point, that the way the boardwalk walk comes out and meets the tower itself, that just balances that image out nicely. And of course, there's all kinds of foliage and stuff in the frame to fill it up too. But you can definitely see where the walkway comes out and hits the tower, and just balances it out, like I say. Your thoughts, Dave, on rule of thirds?
Yeah, and the rule of thirds is a nice way to get around centering the images.
Yeah.
Because that a lot of times people want to put the focus right, which if you think by default, you want that image to be right in the center to pull people right to the middle. The problem is when you put that image right in the center, it can make, I mean, dead center. It
Yeah.
can make the image make the rest of the picture kind of boring.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It just kind of loses a lot of the, it's going to sound kind of making up, but dynamic. I know it
Hmm.
sounds weird for a photo, but dynamic. But if you're in the middle, it just feels a lot more stacked. And if it's unbalanced or not, even if it's not symmetrical, you have it not in the middle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it has a little bit more of a feel to it than just putting dead in the center. So I think that's one part where the rule of third, even if you don't do the four corner rule of thirds,
Hmm.
but just knowing that keep it, and that way it's nice because you're keeping it off center, but you're not putting it way over on the edge
Yeah. Yeah.
where,
I mean, imagine this picture here. If I had put
yeah,
the vertical part of the tower in the center of the frame with the walkway coming off to the side, I think it would have looked completely left side heavy in the frame.
yeah,
And the right side would just be empty, like maybe not empty space, but I think it would just look awkward.
hmm
So that's rule of thirds. And our next one is leading lines. And
right.
that's yours, Dave.
Okay. From the chat, look for natural or man-made lines that can lead the viewer's eyes into the image. Examples include railroad, fences, rivers, or even shadows. These lines add depth and guide the viewer's attention to the main subject. The classic one that I think a lot of when you're like a kid in elementary school, if you have art class, is the telephone poles
Yeah.
along a road kind of leading off and how they're getting smaller. So you learn perspective that way,
Hmm.
where you're leading to a single point. And it can, like I said, it can either lead to a subject or it can just have a feeling of going off in the distance. Think
Yeah.
about looking down a railroad track or looking down the road that may go off in the distance and maybe bend off a little bit, but you're still leading yourself away. So you have a feeling of swoopiness or a feeling of motion that you can get off of there.
Yeah. And it doesn't
And
have to be a straight line either.
no, no, it could just kind of lead you off. And when I get to my next point, there's also a little bit of leading lines in addition to the main point on that one too. But for this one, this is the Mon Incline in Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
And this is at the bottom, looking straight up at the top station, and this is I forget which one's older. I think the Mon one is older. Originally, when this thing was built, there was the passenger one, which is this one. So it takes you from the bottom to the top of the hill. There was also a cargo one. So because this was built in the 1880s, you would put your horse-drawn, I don't want to say carriage, that's not the right term, but horse-drawn cart or delivery horse-drawn. In the
Hmm.
other incline, it would take you from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill. And it's really steep. Um, you don't get a feeling until you get on it how steep it actually is.
Yeah.
But looking
Well,
from the
I've seen
bottom,
pictures that you've had
yeah,
of looking at this from the side, and it
yeah,
does look pretty steep.
yeah.
But what I like about the way you've composed this one is, you know, the leading lines take you up to the top, but that it doesn't end there for me anyway. My eyes keep going around the frame because you have um, the car for the lack
Hmm.
of term. I don't know if that's what you call it.
Yeah,
But you
yeah.
have the car on the left,
Hmm.
and there's a building on the right hand side, and those to me are points of interest because you not only have the car on the left, but you have the reflection of the building in the windows
Right.
of the car,
Yeah.
and I think that is so cool. Um, and you managed to stand in the exact spot you needed to be to, if you look at the leading lines going up to the top on the left hand side, if you follow that down with your eye, the reflection is almost perfectly aligned as if that was just a window with no glass in it and you could see the track through there. Like that
And
is amazing to me how you managed to do that.
I, dumb luck. I actually did not plan that reflection. I did not plan that reflection. But yeah, and basically what you're seeing on the right is
Hmm.
the bottom half of the station when the car comes down.
Yeah.
So if you look at the door on the far right, that door would open up and you get into the next car
Oh yeah.
after
Yeah.
it comes
Okay.
down.
Well, that gives
So,
that a sense of scale then too, knowing what that is.
mhm. And like I said, just the way the windows just reflect that perfectly, and the green and everything. It's you kind of like I said, the left side looks like you're looking through the car
Yeah,
instead of looking at
it
a
does.
reflection.
Yeah.
But
But so I mean, this is
yeah,
a classic example of leading lines,
hmm,
and it leads your eyes through the frame. But just the way you've composed this and what the subject matter of it all is, your eyes just keep going around and around, and that makes a very interesting photo for me, and I'm sure everybody would agree with that.
I think.
So that's pretty cool.
Now, one thing that is kind of neat on this that notice on the tracks as they go up, there are lights on the outside. So at
Yeah,
night they light up. So that's the way you can actually, if you think about it, if you take this picture at night, it would have a different feel to it because the
yeah,
leading lines, you wouldn't be able to see the track so much, but you would be able to see the lights on the outside kind of following up.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that'd be interesting if you ever got a shot of this at night. I don't know if you could stand where you were there
Oh yeah,
and get
yeah,
that
because
same shot or not, but
it'd be easier to do um not in the middle of spring or summer
yeah,
just
yeah,
because it doesn't get dark until like 9:30 or so, and I don't know how
yeah.
late it's open till.
Well into the fall when it
Yeah,
gets dark around 5:30 or so.
yeah, exactly, and then you could see it lit up then, and this would be you know, like I said though, but this is literally a tilted train, if you will,
Yeah,
because you can tell they look like railroad tracks.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So you have that going up to the point of the other station.
Yep. Yeah. Well, cool. So, leading lines, there's lots of possibilities there. And again, it doesn't have to be straight perspective like that. It could be um uh like Dave said, it could curve through the frame or whatever, just wherever your eyes go. So the next one is so there's two of them in the program that have to do with symmetry. This one is symmetry and patterns. So I'll read the what ChatGTP gave us, and it says symmetrical compositions can be visually pleasing. Look for some symmetrical elements such as buildings, reflections, or landscapes. Additionally, patterns in nature or repetitive shapes can create a strong visual impact. So that's exactly what happened with this one. This is I don't know my flowers, as you know, so this is some kind of a big daisy that we have in a flower pot in the backyard of our house here, and they've been growing nicely, and now there's probably, I don't know, three or four of them in the pot, and they're just white, as you can see looking at the image on your podcast player screen there. And well, there was an ant walking around, frolicking about this one here. So I was out taking a whole bunch of pictures of it, and so the where the symmetry is in this image is, well, the center of the flower is in the center, but just a little below center. So center vertically, but just a little bit below center horizontally. And the symmetry is the fact that there's the petals of the flowers going each way, but then there's patterns too. So the patterns are in the center of the flower. There's all these little, I don't know, stamen. Again, I'm not a botanist, but these little parts around the center of the flower have a very distinct pattern. And there's also patterns on the petals themselves, which, show texture and, they kind of go everywhere out from the center. And, looking at the ant, it's not perfectly centered, which kind of defeats the symmetry idea. But when you think about it, if you look at you got the ant, but then you've got a water droplet opposite, still kind of on the edge of the center of the flower, near the bottom part of the frame. There's a water droplet there, or a couple of them, that are, kind of almost symmetrical in nature as far as the image goes, but that's kind of a minor part, really. But I just thought that the biggest part of the symmetry was, with the center of the flower, right center of the frame, maybe a little bit below center, but center vertically, and the patterns were the things in the middle of the flower and on the petals themselves. So that's just something to give it some strong visual impact, I think.
Oh yeah, and it's still kind of mind blowing that if you zoom in, seeing the detail on the ant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the ability to see the water droplets on a dark background in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
This was taken with my reflex long range macro lens.
okay.
And I believe I was using the Reflex Pro camera app, but I had an epiphany when I was doing this, and that was to just use the Apple camera app and go to 2 times, because then it still uses the main camera, but it gets you closer without having to put the lens on the telephoto. So that's what I did with this one, and it worked out pretty good, I thought. Got nice and close, and
does the 2x that uses a full 48 megapixel image then?
Well, it crops the sensor, right?
Okay.
It uses a central part of the sensor, but it's native resolution at 12 megapixels.
Okay.
So yeah.
But
so
still,
that's
the ant is, to me, because it does have a vertical orientation. If the ant was tilted, it would throw it off.
Oh yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
But the fact that the ant is basically going up and down.
Yeah.
That it kind of adds to the symmetry because it gives you a reference.
Yeah, and it would have been so much better if he was just right top dead center, but nothing I could do about that. It's not like I can
Oh
guide
no, I
him.
mean, yeah, well, this is also, like I said, this is why we said that rule of thumb, if you're, especially if you're doing nature,
Hmm.
nature is amazing.
Yeah.
Landscape shots, and you're never going to get pixel perfection
Right. Yeah.
because you're taking photos of something that is not planned a lot of times or not staged.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
if it's not staged, it's really hard to get that exact symmetry.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. Yeah. So next we have one of yours again, and it's framing. And I thought this was a pretty interesting image. Um, and I just love these bridges in Pittsburgh.
Well, we got enough of them. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so this was taken during the marathon. So that's why I was able to get this image, because this is in the middle of the road.
Okay. Yeah.
And what you're seeing above is the on ramp to the bridge.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of acts as a frame for the city and the
Hmm.
image.
Right.
I didn't darken the underneath. I darkened it a little bit, but I
Yeah.
didn't completely darken it. So you can still see a little bit of the yellow
Hmm.
supports underneath. And that ramp basically goes from left to right, and then you bend onto the bridge going downtown.
Oh, okay.
So not only does the bar kind of going across the top frame the whole image and the bridge itself kind of frames into the city itself too.
Yeah.
And also just the river down below, and the on ramp above gives it a wedge shaped frame to the rest of the shot.
And yeah, and that's interesting because generally when people think of framing, you think of, just rectangular or maybe
Hmm.
even round. But a wedge shaped frame is really, it's really unique and it works with this one.
Yeah.
So, so just read what it said for framing
Okay. Yep.
then.
Sorry about that. Yep. So
Yeah.
this is utilize elements in the scene to create a frame around your subject. This can be archways, trees, windows, or any other object that helps direct the viewer's focus to the main subject.
And that's
So,
exactly what this does.
yep. And this
You
is
know,
also, I think, a little bit of leading lines,
yeah.
because as you look, and this is the Fort Pitt Bridge leading into downtown.
Hmm.
Um, it kind of, because this is a double decker bridge, so both the top and bottom kind of lead right into town.
Yeah. Yeah.
If to kind of give this perspective, if you've ever seen, what is it, Diary of a Wallflower movie,
Haven't heard of it.
okay, or a lot of the shots going into Pittsburgh through the Fort Pitt Tunnel, this is the bridge you come off on. And I've seen a few, well, going outbound, which is the lower deck. You will see memes that say right lane has to go left, right lane have to go left lane has to go right. You have 600 feet to make it happen. Go. Or, oh, look at the beautiful city. Oh, you're in the wrong lane now. You got a 5 mile detour.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really like the way the framing is.
Yeah.
With the wedge shape of the frame,
Hmm.
it's so unique. And again, this is another image where the eyes just keep kind of going around. Like, the underside of the part on the top it's darker, so it's a little mysterious, and you wonder, you know,
Yeah.
what is that constructed like? And then you get even the overcast of the clouds shows a lot of texture and detail in the clouds, which the iPhone is really good at doing. It's really
Yeah.
good at doing whatever is in the landscape, and in this case, it's the bridge and the city and the river and that. But it also gets the clouds. And had you been using a traditional camera, you'd have to do a double exposure to get this kind of detail.
Right. Right. And I
So
did
yeah.
do some editing in Lightroom to boost up some parts and
Yeah.
boost
Oh
down
yeah.
some others and add a little bit of clarity and the dehazing part.
Right. Yep.
So
And that's expected. I mean,
yeah.
you've got quite a range of a range of lighting
Hmm.
conditions here. So
And it is
that's
amazing what it can, because this was not a raw photo. So
oh
this is
yeah.
a JPEG photo that I did, and
Yeah.
it still was able to save this detail.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And the other
Yeah.
thing to think about, and this is just general tip, not
Mhm.
necessarily composition. I did a quick wipe down of the lens before I took the photo.
Okay. Right.
Because this was at mile 8-ish or so of running. So, and I had this on an arm pack that I was running
Oh
with.
yeah. Yeah.
So I took it out of the arm pack. Of course, you run 8 miles, you tend to sweat a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So I had to find somewhere dry to wipe off the lens to make sure it wouldn't have a spot on it. But even if you're doing something where you're not necessarily wet, just do a quick wipe of the lens.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, so the next one
Yep.
is negative space. And this is the one that I was going to cover. So negative space. So I'll get it right. Chat GTP said sometimes leaving empty or negative space around the subject can enhance the composition and draw attention to the main subject. Experiment with different compositions by including open skies, empty walls, or expansive landscapes. So the image that I provided for this isn't any of that, but um it's part of a river. We were down at the park. I just took this today, as a matter of fact, and we were taking the dog for a walk, and my wife, I was on the riverbank doing other things, and my wife called me over to this little bridge and said, "Hey, there's a big fish." So I ran up there, and sure enough, this great big, I think it's a catfish because it looks like it has
Hmm.
the mouth is at the lower part of the head, and it was just swimming along. So I had my circular polarizer on my iPhone,
Mm.
and I was making sure that I could see the fish below the surface of the water, and it was just swimming along. And um this is uncropped, so you have the subject, the main subject, takes up such a small part of the frame, and the rest of it is all negative space. And I guess it's called negative because it's not part of the subject. I don't know what the best way to describe that is, but it just allows you to look at the subject without really worrying about what's around it. And so like another good example of negative space could be like a bird flying in the air, and all you've got is sky around a little bird. The bird takes up such a small part of the frame. That could be considered a great example of negative space.
Yeah. And one thing that can be a help, um, just knowing, like your negative space isn't completely flat. There's still texture to it.
Yes.
There's still texture on the water. So if you think negative space, just don't think like pitch black and only having a highlight. You could still do that. I mean, if you're going dramatic, like a portrait,
Hmm.
you want to focus on that person in the portrait. And even in portrait mode, you can select it where it'll have a completely black or completely white surrounding to the actual subject itself.
Hmm.
But having a little bit of texture, that's still, it's not, it's still an option with negative space.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as the subject basically takes up a very small portion of the frame,
Hmm.
and and the rest kind of don't matter so much. That's a good way to give it negative space. And so next, there's actually you have the next three, Dave.
Okay.
Dave sent me some pretty cool images to fit into this stuff. This next one is for depth and layers.
Right. And this was taken during just a walk time I had. And this
Well,
is one thing.
read the description
Okay,
there
I'm sorry.
first.
Yep, keep looking. Okay, consider adding depth to your images by including foreground, middle ground, and background elements, and a cat meowing. This can create a sense of dimension and make the photo more engaging. So this was again during a photo walk. I was no, I don't want to call it a photo walk. It was a walk I was doing that I was trying to keep in mind as I was walking different photos. And this is on top of Mount Washington. So this is if you think about where the incline was, this the picture I'm doing now was at the top, looking
Okay,
down at
yep.
the city.
Yeah.
And there's enough trees on the hill that the city kind of pokes through the trees.
Hmm.
So the trees are relatively close, 20, 30 feet away, relatively close, and the city is a half mile away across the river. So it does give you that night depth. And of course, the iPhone does a good job with keeping everything in focus like this, but still,
Yeah.
you do still have a little bit of a focus difference between, and because it was a hot day and it's across a river, it's a little bit hazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that adds a depth perception.
Hmm.
Also knowing that the trees are obviously smaller than the buildings across the river,
Oh yeah,
you
for
know.
sure. But this is
So
this is what I guess what they call compressing the image too.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And this is a little bit of framing too, because the
Yes.
trees act like a bottom frame and the sky acts like a top frame, if you will,
Yeah. Yeah.
to the downtown images. Because the big building that says UPMC on it is the U.S. Steel Building,
Yeah.
and it's around 800 feet tall.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it's like I said, it's a good distance away. It's not, but it. I also like the contrast of
Oh
the
yeah. Yeah.
green trees with skyscrapers.
Yeah. You could kind of call this concrete jungle, and it could mean two things.
Hmm. And that's kind of what I was thinking because you have different buildings, and well, you actually have one building under construction. You can notice if you zoom in
Yeah.
just to the
Yeah.
right of center.
Yeah. I can see the crane.
Notice also that this is kind of not 100% rule of thirds, but it's almost always when you look at pictures of downtown Pittsburgh, the U.S. Steel Building gets your attention because not only is it the tallest building, it doesn't taper going up to the top
Hmm.
like most skyscrapers, and it's black and it looks black.
Yeah. Yeah. It's dark and it kind of
Hmm.
stands out a little bit. Yeah. And
But notice it's
even though it's in behind everything in this frame,
hmm
it still stands out because it's because of the darkness of it and whatnot.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that adds even a little bit more depth because you have the building that's closest, that's kind of tall,
Hmm.
was built in the early 80s. And it's kind of it's not stainless, but it's that kind of light
Oh yeah.
metal and glass of the
Yeah.
early 80s look.
Yeah.
Um, and it kind of contrasts to again the thing that it says UPMC because that was built in the late 60s, early 70s.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so it's a different. You figure it's the layers are not just physical layers here, but when you have different types of items, it could be, you know, different types of like nature, different types of bushes, different types of
Hmm.
trees.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could have trees and meadow, or tree in a grassy area, or different types of maybe a bush in the front that's in flower, it's in bloom, or
Yeah.
just a different type of bush like an evergreen, or even in the winter scene, if you want to get depth, if you had some evergreen trees which are green and the brown sticks in the
Hmm.
background, that gives you some additional depth.
Yeah.
So it can
No.
be depth due to the distance, but depth also due to different textures that are in the
Yeah.
photo.
Yeah. And I see five layers in this. And so what I see going from the front to the back is I see the green foliage for sure. And then I see the building right in the center, the older building. or the one that was built in the 80s rather.
Hmm.
And then the next layer to me is the black building. Even though it's kind of part of that middle layer, it's still to me kind of like a different layer.
Hmm.
And then beyond that, if you look in between the buildings, you see, trees and whatnot way back in the distance. And then, of course, then you got the sky. So that to me looks like five different layers in an image. And it's so well captured that gives it a lot of interest and a lot of different things to look at.
Oh, thank
So
you.
that's pretty cool.
Yep.
Great example of depth and layers, a lot of depth. So next is point of view.
Okay. For this one, experiment with different angles and perspectives to add interest to your composition. Try shooting from a low or high angle, or even getting close to your subject for a unique point of view. So this is where having the iPhone does have an advantage
Hmm.
because it works on macros so well without,
Yeah.
point and shoots obviously don't do macro well. Uh, Exchangeable lenses do macro excellent, but it's not as easy as holding a phone up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So this was actually taken, I believe these are metal pipes. This was taken back in February. So again, it was cold. Um, and this was, you can see, and I got really close. So there's, again, remember in the beginning I was saying how you can have multiple things going on.
Yeah.
There's leading lines here too,
Yep. Yep.
because
There
you have
sure
the
is.
two poles here, kind of leading from bottom right to upper left. But
Hmm.
the nearer one has the frost on it. So this is where, again, just having in mind as you're going walking around, having that photographer's mind,
Yeah.
saying, this is just literally frost on a pipe, but
Yeah. It's
getting close. It's something that you really don't want to grasp with your bare hands,
oh yeah. Yeah.
because this was an exceptionally cold day. But
Hmm.
I was kind of seeing this, and I got really close. And if you zoom in, you can actually see the crystalline structure
Yes.
on the frost. But
Yeah.
as you're leading away, it gets a little blurrier and blurrier and blurrier.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I think you focused on just the right spot in this image because had you focused any closer, um, I think it would have taken too much away from the background.
Yeah.
And if you had focused too far up the pipe the other way, then it would have taken too much from the foreground and made it,
Hmm.
the element of interest wouldn't be there. But focusing right where you did, you leave just enough out of focus, like bokeh, I guess you could say, before and after the
Hmm.
point of focus that it really it's more compelling this way. And like you say, it shows the patterns of the crystals and stuff.
Hmm.
So, I think that's really
Yeah.
well captured.
And this is one advantage of the iPhone is that you can see what the image is going to look like before you take it.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was able to get down and I remember this day. I remember this day. The temperature in Fahrenheit was around 4,
Ooh,
and the wind chill was sub-zero Fahrenheit.
yeah. That's cold.
So it was this was frigid. This was frigid. So this is not necessarily a day you can spend a long time outside taking photos.
Yeah.
So having it where I can go down and say, okay, no, because a lot of these shots, and I don't particularly remember this one, but a lot of these macro shots, I try to get closer and further away so you can test it as you're taking the photo
Yeah.
to see if you like how it'll zoom in or not.
Yeah.
So that is one advantage there.
Yeah. Well, I think getting back to point of view, I think it's really cool how you got like okay, so just to put this into perspective, and educate me as well. these pipes were they laying on the ground or
No, they were up. So they were um maybe hip level, maybe a little bit taller.
okay.
So I just had to bend. I had kind of had to bend over, but I didn't have to
Yeah,
bend
yeah.
like on the ground to take a shot
Right.
to take the shot.
Okay. Because you could have easily, if it just stood up and shot this looking down at them,
Yeah,
that would have given a complete different look to it from a different point of view,
exactly.
even though your camera was in close proximity to where it actually was for this shot. Um, I mean, just uh the angle that you approached it with the camera makes a big difference in how
Hmm.
the final image looks. So,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, another one would have been if, and I'm trying to remember exactly how the pipes were if I could have done this, get between the two pipes
yeah,
and
yeah.
do more of a leading lines look straight away.
Yeah.
Especially if I could have gotten someone like in the back, admittedly, it would have been blurry, the person in the background,
Right. Yeah.
but you could have gotten maybe a person walking between looking like the two pipes or people in the background.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I
So
said, different point of view, or obviously on this day and this location would not have been possible, but even going from below looking up.
yes. Yeah.
But again,
Yeah.
when it's that cold, I'm not getting on the ground,
Yeah. Really.
or at least on purpose.
And just to put that that part of it into perspective too, as far as the temperature goes, um, you said it was about 4 degrees Fahrenheit,
Yeah.
and so for Celsius, 0 degrees Celsius is 32 Fahrenheit. So you can imagine just how cold that must have been. We'll let the listeners do the math on that one, but that's pretty cold. That's pretty cold.
Yeah.
And again, if it's a good thing you didn't lose your balance and have to grab the pipe just to just help you from falling over. You have been stuck
Oh,
there.
yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so that's pretty cool.
This is one day that I had to be outside. I had an event, so I had to be
Uh,
outside.
yeah,
If I didn't have to be outside,
you
uh,
wouldn't have been.
I wouldn't have been. No.
Yeah, I hear you. Um, so next is balance and symmetry, and this one's yours as well.
Okay. Yep. And this is actually a little bit okay. Let me do balance the elements within a frame to avoid a cluttered or unbalanced composition. Pay attention to the visual weight of different elements. Ensure they are distributed harmoniously. So, this is similar to symmetry, but
Hmm.
instead of patterns, finding different patterns, because there's still patterns here also. But
Yes, there is.
this, what I have here is kind of a larger structure.
Yeah.
Obviously, because you have a flower, I have a bridge.
Hmm.
Again, this was taken during the Pittsburgh Marathon. This was like a mile before the earlier picture with the bridge, different bridge. Uh, and again, this is one of those shots that, and I would say if there are festivals that different cities have, Pittsburgh has something called open streets where they shut down the streets to vehicular traffic and you can walk or bicycle on the streets where you can get these different perspectives that you normally can't get.
Yeah, yeah.
This is in the middle of a bridge that is pretty busy. So unless it was race day, you're not getting in this location.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So you do have the symmetry, like I said, in terms of multiple things. You have the balance because you do have the symmetry in the bridge, the left and the right looking, the same. You do have some
Hmm.
leading lines with the arch of the bridge going down,
Yeah,
meeting,
yeah.
looking like it's going to meet the road coming up towards it. So you have kind of two leading lines coming together.
Hmm.
Where it's not 100% symmetric, still balanced, is seeing the runners that are primarily on the right side close in.
Yeah. And,
A
and and
little
I don't know
further
about
back, they're
anybody.
a little spread out a little bit more.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know about anybody else looking at this image, but for me, I mean, I know they're there and I know they're significant, but I don't see them when I'm thinking about symmetry. I see the bridge, I see, the structure on the side of the bridge that's leading into the frame, I see the
Hmm.
two concrete towers, and I see the symmetry and the
Hmm.
balance of the bridge itself, and the people, the runners, are to me like kind of like an afterthought in that whole concept.
Yeah,
So it
they're
doesn't
spread
bother
out.
me that they're there.
Yeah, yeah, they're spread out, and they're not overwhelming the bridge, if you will.
Yeah, yeah,
But they're
exactly.
adding a little extra texture than if this was just a empty bridge.
Yeah. Had somebody been 4 or 5 feet closer to you and taken up a lot more of the frame, then that would have ruined the whole
Yeah,
concept of balance and symmetry. But I don't think that happens in this frame.
yeah. And
So
again, this
that's
was yeah, this was, and like I said, just knowing you have that nice balance, again, something man-made that obviously is more symmetrical than something natural,
mhm.
but getting that perspective where, and I like the fact that the clouds, like is it like with the other photo, it adds
Yep.
texture
Yeah, yeah.
to the
It
background.
keeps it interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, like I
Yeah.
said, this just, if you can, especially if you have time, if you have a time or an event where you normally would not have that point of view to take a picture,
Yeah.
you know. And I just like, especially when it comes to, because even if you're driving on this bridge, you're not going to get this angle,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So
you know,
you made
because
the
if you're
most of
going
your
on, you're going to
opportunity.
be off to the right a little bit more going onto the bridge. You're not going to be dead, almost dead center.
Yeah. Yeah. So you took advantage and made the best of this opportunity by taking
Hmm.
this shot. And you took other shots of this as well. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
remember we talked about perspectives, and you took this one, then you took one closer in to
Oh,
where the bridge comes down. Uh,
actually, different bridge.
was it a different bridge? Okay. But the same idea though.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah.
Same idea. Day before. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But basically, yeah, like you said about the amount of bridges, we got
Hmm.
bridges.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's cool. That's a good
Yeah.
illustration of balance and symmetry. And again, the runners, they don't bother me with this concept. Because they're smaller in the frame, and they're still significant, I think, because it just tells a story about where and when you took this picture, especially being able to do it with no traffic. But it doesn't, to me, they don't affect the balance and symmetry of the frame. So finally, we have simplify, and this is the one I was going to talk about. So avoid cluttered compositions by simplifying your frame. Remove any distractions that do not contribute to the overall story or focus of your image. This helps direct the viewer's attention to the main subject. So with this image, it is a chipmunk. And it so I think there's a few things going on here, Dave. We've got simplify, which is it shows the chipmunk in its
Mhm.
environment, which is the subject, but this is cropped in, um, and I cropped it in just for that reason. It's just to simplify the composition because before the crop, there were so many ferns and plants and everything else
Mm.
around that you could hardly even tell. Well, I mean, you could tell, but I mean, it was a lot harder to tell that there's a chipmunk in the picture. So I forget just how much I cropped out, but I want to say I bet you it's a good 30% I took off the edges.
Mm.
So, but we've also got framing in this.
Hmm.
And, the chipmunk is framed by the fence horizontally and vertically by the ferns. So it's, kind of another aspect of composition covered there.
Hmm.
But,
Also, rule of thirds.
and rule of thirds,
Yeah.
yes. The top rail and the vertical rail on the left, they intersect just about where the guidelines or the grid lines in your camera app would cross. So that's kind of a cool, and the head of that nail that's holding them together would
Hmm.
probably be right in that spot or very close to it. So, but make sure when you want to simplify the frame or simplify your composition, get closer, crop, do whatever you have to do, but get rid of all the stuff that's really non-essential to the composition,
Hmm.
and focus on your subject, quote unquote focus,
Yeah.
so that your subject becomes the subject and not just something buried in the rest of it.
Yeah, it's equivalent of when you show a picture to someone, you don't want to have to say, "See right there, there. That's what I'm
Exactly.
taking a photo of."
Yes,
You
it
want
takes.
people to have to not have. You want people to see it, not have to hunt.
Yes, it takes the questioning out of it for sure. Yeah. I
Also,
mean, I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say real quick that if I
Yeah.
before the crop, you probably would have just seen a fence in the shrubs. So,
And one thing that helps is the chipmunk being a different, even though they're the fence and the chipmunk are both brown.
mhm.
You have the white fur and you have the black stripes and
Yeah,
you have the
yeah,
green around it. So it kind of stands out because the coloration's different.
yeah. Yeah, there's a bit of a contrast there for sure.
Hmm.
And that draws your eye in. I think it's something,
And that's a
elementally
way
different.
to simplify also is simplify colors, you know,
Yes.
because even if you don't, not necessarily negative space, even though they're somewhat related, but your colors being, here you have basically two greens. You have the ferns and you have the kind of deciduous plants. They're both
Yeah.
green. One's a little brighter than the other. The
Hmm.
fence is kind of a solid light brown gray.
Yeah.
Kind of like how fences get over time. They get a little grayer. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
background colors are the colors themselves are simple. It isn't a rainbow color in the background and trying to pick out your subject.
Yeah. 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 When you said color, that really, it's an excellent illustration of simplifying, because for example that I think of is in the fall, when you have the fall colors on the trees, all it takes is for one deciduous tree to be growing amongst a bunch of evergreens, and it just pops out.
Hmm.
And if you get close enough, well, even if there's no other deciduous trees, if it's all evergreens with one deciduous tree in there, it simplifies the composition with color as the tool. And that's a prime example of it right there.
Hmm.
So yeah, so fill the frame with your subject, keep the composition decluttered and simple, and it just makes the subject stand out. So, well, that's it. That's number nine. We had nine to do,
Yep.
and we've done them all. So that was mastering composition, and um, I think that's a pretty good discussion on the different aspects of composition. And like you said, Dave, earlier, these rules are made to be broken. There's no hard and fast rules of composition. I mean, there's other things that could be covered in composition too. Um, like there's the it's that darn thing that goes around the frame. I can never remember the name of it. Uh, anyway, it kind of swirls around and ends up, it starts with the whole frame, and then uses half the frame, and then quarter of the
Oh,
frame.
I know you're talking about. Not the
You know what
is
I'm
it
talking
golden
about?
ratio?
Yeah, that's it. The golden ratio. I mean,
Okay.
we could have got into that too, but Chat GTP didn't give it to us, so
Well,
this is what
yeah.
we ended up with. But so again, we've got 7 episodes to do, and I'll give everybody a heads up of what's coming up. So the next episode is going to be talking about utilizing natural light, and then we're going to talk about understanding exposure, and then after that is exploring iPhone camera features, and then mastering editing apps, followed by using accessories, and we'll finish up with developing your unique style. So those are the shows that are coming up in our series about improving your iPhone photography. So I'm excited about this. This is
Mhm.
so cool. And a little inside baseball for everybody is Dave and I generally don't know what the heck we're going to be talking about until we get on Zoom here and start.
Yeah.
Okay, oh yeah, well, we could do this. Well, I shouldn't say that. Sometimes earlier in the day, we'll text each other and say,
Yeah.
well, maybe we could talk about this or that. Maybe we could talk about that. And then we come up with an idea.
I don't know, because as everyone knows, this is not our main job.
Right.
This
Yeah.
is not even a job, if you will. This is a hobby. The podcasting, the hobby like photography.
Yeah.
So a lot of times work. We both have regular 40-hour plus a week jobs. Family, everything else that you have to deal with. And you're like, okay, podcast in 3 days. Is there anything news that's coming up? Is there anything here that happened in the last 2 weeks? When WWDC happens, or
or the
early
release of a new
September, we're going
iPhone
to
or
talk
something.
about the new iPhone. Duh.
Yeah. 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 So, I mean, but it's just as a rule, though, we generally don't know what the heck we're going to talk about until a few
Close
hours
by.
before we start
Yeah.
recording. So, but this has given us an outline for the next 7 shows.
2 months. Yeah.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of give ourselves a little bit of homework with each of these assignments and try not to dig out of our archives. But now we know that the next show is going to be about utilizing natural light. So we're going to try to come up with some photos that are about that. So that'll kind of be like recent photos. But it won't be a segment of itself. It'll be throughout the program. So I'm really excited about this because I like having homework like this to do, especially when it comes to getting out to take pictures. It gets me off my duff and out in the fresh air and gets me doing something. So, all right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this, everybody. We'd love to hear what you think about it. Leave something in the Facebook group, or hit us up on Twitter or Mastodon or wherever you find us, and let us know what you think of this whole idea. We'd love to hear what you have to say, and any ideas for stuff in the future too. Don't be afraid to let us know. So, on that note, Dave, let's hear about where we can find you.
Sure, you can find me on most social media as Prof Pod. You can find me on TikTok as Prof Pod PGH, and on the Facebook group as Dave Podner Jr.
Alrighty. And you can find me on Instagram at Macmillan Photo, Twitter, Macmillan_photo. Probably the best place is go to the website called about.me/Macmillan, and you can find all my links there to wherever I'm going to be, Glass, Flickr, all that stuff. So, like I say, hit us up, tell us what you think about this whole idea, and because we'd love to hear it. So anyway, thanks, Dave, for your continued expertise and wonderful banter, and I guess we'll see everybody in the next one.
Have a great week, everyone.